going on, everybody? We are back. We got episode number 156 of the Club and Sub podcast. This week we're talking UFC Sao Paulo, headlined by Derrick Lewis, the Black Beast, Jailton Almeida. Fun fight for as long as it's going to last. Pretty fun card for a Brazilian card. I have a fair amount of bets on it. I'm interested to talk about it. Before we hop in, though, guys, drop a like, subscribe. It'll help us out. We'd really appreciate it. And let's talk about last card. It was 2 weeks ago. It was UFC 294. Kind of an annoying card for me. I lost 2.1 units. I lost half a unit on Nathaniel Wood by submission. He went for it, but I just didn't get it. I also lost 3 units on a parlay with Nathaniel Wood and Mago. The Wood fight just annoying. I feel like he got muscled. He got muscled way more than I expected, and just in general, didn't fight optimally. Wasn't a very good bet on my end. I had 2 units on Bruno Silva plus 169. Ironically, I feel like the line movement was right, but also I think I was 100% right on my view on Magomedov. The guy is clearly just a fraud who can't grapple and can't box. Bruno Silva just turning out to be exactly what we thought he was. Pretty annoying. I had a unit, Mike Breeden, plus 335. That was awesome.
Yep.
That was great. Great cash. I had a unit on Abu Azaitar, plus 205. Close fight. Probably a good bet. Don't really regret it. Is what it is. Lost a close decision to a younger guy. I had 1.5 units, Victor Henry at plus 440. No contest. It was a competitive fight. I don't really regret it. Would probably make the same bet all over again. Had 3.1 units on Said Nurmagomedov, minus 207. You can't really take too much from the outcome. Although I guess we all knew Gafrov was very live to stick his head into a guillotine there. Then I had 2.5 units on Kamaru Usman. Was probably a pretty good bet. I thought it was a draw personally. I thought the second and third round were fairly clear, but I also agreed with the 10-8 in round 1. Hard to know how that plays out if you run it 1,000 times. Obviously, Khamzat's good enough to get Usman down. How often he 10-8s him, I'm not really sure. Obviously, he struggled to control him the later the fight went. And obviously, Usman, pretty large edge on the feet, which is kind of what I expected. Khamzat continues to be the best fighter in the UFC for 5 minutes. And it's fairly clear that after that 5 minutes, he has a lot of pretty glaring vulnerabilities. But I do think he can finish anybody in 5 minutes. I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes Strickland in 5 minutes. If he doesn't, though, he's going to get his face boxed off. But yeah, 2.5 unit loss there on a majority decision, plus 250. I don't really regret the bet at all. Don't really regret the sizing at all. Fight. I didn't expect Khamzat to dominate the way in the grappling that he did early, but other than that, the fight went more or less the way I expected. And then I had 4.5 units on Makhachev minus 225. Look, I bet him at minus 330 the first time. This time, the whole macro was against Volk here. The size, obviously, wasn't in camp, coming off an injury in Abu Dhabi. Was just kind of an easy click for me. And yeah, Islam made pretty easy work of him. How was your night, Lag? Did you profit?
Nope. Slight loss, minus 0.02 units. Unreal. So again, had another alongside you. I had Mike Breeden at plus 250. Nice. And then the only losing bet of the night was really the parlay that I had Makhachev and Wood. And really the only thing we talk about Wood, yes, he did look underwhelming, but we got to talk about how the ref missed the point there. Naimov grabbing the cage,
he definitely. Look, the dude
that's
got
a draw at worst, really. But
he got punted in the nuts twice. Their point should have been taken, and it probably had an outsized impact. My big thing with that fight was, and why I just didn't expect Naimov to be that much stronger than him, to be honest. And he kind of big brothered him around the cage a bit, So
yep. But yeah, that was it for me.
But yeah, so with that, we'll jump into this card. First fight of the night, we got Fernandez making his UFC debut. He's taking on 16-7 Mark Diakiese. Current price, Diakiese minus 175. Comeback on Fernandez plus 150. I'm pretty heavy on Diakiese here. I initially bet him to win 2 units at minus 180. Obviously, lots of money came in on the other side, so I took him to win another unit at minus 123. So I think I have 4.8 units on Diakiese, thereabouts here. to win 3 units. Pretty passionate take for me. Look, Mark Jacasey, I get it. Everybody's like, oh, Mark Jacasey's a flake, yada, yada, yada. Dude, Mark Jacasey's a good UFC fighter. He's a very good athlete. He's a solid striker. He can hold his own. He's like UFC average in that department. Very good cardio, very durable, very explosive when he wants to be. And he's a pretty good wrestler for a Brit. He is, and he's generally, through most of his fights in his career, had pretty good fight IQ. He's the kind of guy who, when he stepped up to take on the upper class of the division, he's gotten kind of run into a wall and gotten beaten up a bit. But whenever he steps down, he looks pretty well. And now he's taking on this debutant, Fernandez. And I guess you could say Fernandez is explosive and he hits hard, but I don't even know if he hits that hard. Like, he's had a couple kick KOs. He seems, honestly, to me, like more of a jiu-jitsu guy than anything else. I don't think his striking's that good. I think it's very, very telegraphed. I don't think his wrestling is good at all. He has very, very poor hips. His jiu-jitsu is okay. It's not terrible. And that would be my concern here, except I just saw Jacasey deal with Joe Alvarez's jiu-jitsu on top, no problem. And I think his guard is much more dangerous than Coway's is, so I'm not overly concerned. And then, you look at the gas tanks, and Mark's got a huge edge in that department based on the available tape at any rate. And then you just look at who they fought. I mean, Kanan Fernandez, he's been fighting, Brazilian bums. He hasn't really had any kind of stiff competition other than Sardinia, who really grinded him out pretty bad in the latter half of that fight. I mean, Mark Jacasey, solid upper mid-tier UFC fighter with pretty good grappling and well-rounded everywhere against debutante who's not really that good at anything with bad gas tank. I love Mark here. I'm on him pretty big. I think even the current line is pretty good. What are your thoughts, Legs?
Yeah, I played Mark. Not as passionate of a take as you by any means, but minus 150 to win a unit. I mean, it's easy to just fade the unknowns here, really. I mean, the only good things you could say about Fernandez, I mean, his striking is pretty fast, dynamic a bit. Again, like you touched on the jiu-jitsu a little bit. Again, it's flashy, but not that good. Mark has a huge wrestling advantage here, and the later this fight goes, he can hang on the feet. I think round 1 could be a little hairy, but I think this is Mark all day.
I'm kind of curious to see the weigh-ins because, like, Fernandez, I don't know if you noticed it, he seems to be like a foot taller than everybody he's fought, like, regionally, but Mark's listed as being taller than him. So I'll be pretty curious to see, like, how they look next to each other in there. But anyway, moving on, horrendous fight here. Eduardo Mora, she's making her debut against Montserrat Canejo Ruiz. Mora minus 515. The comeback on Ruiz plus 390. What are your thoughts, Legs?
I mean, there's not a ton of tape on Mora, so like you can't say striking not great, this and that, but like decent wrestler in her own right. And much in terms of this matchup, huge size advantage for her, both height and reach, 6 inches in both. I think this is easy Mora win. Ruiz, I mean, scarfold, that's about it. Her striking is pretty shit. So yeah, this should be an easy win for Mora.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much where I come down. I really wanted to have a wager on Ruiz here before I taped it. But I mean, I feel like this dynamic fade more than a bit. I mean, it's this contenders girl who fought another like nothing on contenders, at minus 500. But I just, I just don't see anything in Ruiz's tape to like, really. Mora is a decent jiu-jitsu player. I feel like there's a pretty good chance she's going to take Ruiz's back if she gets there. Ruiz on bottom really just has nothing there at all. Best case for Ruiz is maybe she can get on top and Mora plays guard and she can maybe scrape 2 rounds that way. But Mara is the bigger woman, the more physical woman, the much, much better grappler. And she's probably the better striker too, if we're being honest. I just have no interest in backing Montserrat Ruiz, despite how large the number is. I think Mora should be fine here. Not really a whole lot else. I will say this. The one thing I think on this fight that is kind of interesting, I think the goes the distance at plus is kind of interesting. I mean, I think Amorim probably has better jiu-jitsu than Mora does, and Ruiz made it 15 with her. Now, it was a fucking sweaty 15, to be sure. But she did make it 15 with her. I don't think Mora is anywhere near as dangerous as Amorim is. What are your thoughts on that?
I wouldn't say in the jiu-jitsu realm, no, but I feel like ground and pound, she definitely is more lethal there than Amorim. So I don't think it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be a sweat. I'll say that.
Fair enough. Moving on. Angela Hill, overkill, taking on Denise Gomes. Gomes minus 142. Come back on Hill, plus 122. I love Hill here. I have 3 units on her, plus 135. I don't think she's a lock to win by any means, but I feel the market's perhaps under or dramatically overrating Gomes' last 2 performance. I mean, she had Brener Brazil, who's truly horrendous and has no defense, where she was basically able to just spam overhand rights and touch her chin over and over again. And then Yasmin Uregi, she was plus 300 against. And look, she knocked her out in about 30 seconds. I give her credit. She's got power for a woman. Of that, there's very little doubt. It's everything beyond that. I'm just not really sure that she's any good at anything else. You know, a lot of power, very, very young, would be expecting pretty considerable improvements from Gomes at this point in her career. So a lot of room to get better. But she's not a very good grappler. I mean, the way she got dumpstered by Loma on the mat, pretty deeply concerning. Like, I know Loma's got some decent throws, but Loma top game is kind of shit, if we're being honest. In the striking, yeah, I think it's very, very predictable. You know, I look at this fight and it kind of reminds me a bit of Hill's fight with Emily Ducote. And I think Ducote has better tools pretty much everywhere than Gomes does in the grappling and the striking. Better hands, I think, better kicks. And Hill, you just kind of saw obliterate Ducote. Now, Hill's not elite by any means, but she's surely a top 15 fighter. And obviously, you know, big volume edge, big cardio edge, in my opinion, and obviously just a general experience and competition edge here. You know, who is Denise Gomes beaten that would make you think she should be a favorite against Angela Hill? I kind of look at this fight and I feel like the best upside for Gomes here is hurting Hill a few times. And I think that could happen. We've seen Angela Hill hurt a fair amount in her career. So, I mean, her getting hurt here wouldn't be shocking. But short of that, I mean, I don't think Gomes is a better striker than like any of the women that like Angela Hill has fought in recent years. Like her most recent fights, Godinez, Ducote, Dern. I think all of them would absolutely destroy Gomes, to be honest. So I feel like you have to make Hill a small favorite in this fight. So I'm taking a pretty big position on her here. What are your thoughts, Lags?
I honestly just think this is a pretty close fight. I mean, I think Gomez's power, I think, could offset some of the volume from Hill. I think more or less it's just close to a pick'em.
Yeah. I disagree with this take. Who she beat an argument is terrible. I mean, it's a pretty pertinent argument. Brener Brazil.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, because you could just say already, like, oh, she beat already, but it's like 30 seconds and it was pretty.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But even from a skills perspective, like the first round, she was fighting Rayon Amanda. That was a fairly competitive first round. Amanda just has horrendous cardio. I mean, I feel like we saw. I don't know. I don't really know what Gomes' ceiling is. I just feel like Hill is just so much more proven and like against pretty good competition too. Like Angela Hill went to a split 2 years ago with Yolanda Lemos. She beat Emily Ducote. She beat Lupita Godinez by decision. I'd make Ducote and Godinez both decent sized favorites here. So yeah.
I just feel like Brazil to a lot of people too. People think that she's pretty good, and
she's not that great. Brazil's horrible. She's not really UFC level in my opinion. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I like the Angie side here. Moving on. Vitor Patrino. He's taking on Modestas Bowkus. The line on Patrino at the moment, minus 235. Come back on Bowkus, plus 200. What are your thoughts here, Legs?
So first off, I think Modestas did not win his last fight. Betsock Pog on his last fight, plus 170. Thought that was the right side. Because again, I mean, Modestas in general, I mean, he's a guy who's not assertive.
I bet Modestas live in his last fight.
Wow.
I kind of thought he won.
All right. Fair enough. But yeah, I mean, I just don't think he's very assertive. Pretty low volume. He's fine to just pot shot here and there. And Patrino on the other side, pretty big power. I think he has a pretty decent sized grappling edge here. My worry for him is, I mean, the cardio doesn't look great, and his defensive striking doesn't look that great either. He's pretty hittable himself, but Modestas doesn't pack that much pop in his punch, I should say. But I think it should be Patrino.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to bet it, I don't think, unless it really blew out towards Patrino. I have suspicions about Patrino that I could be wrong about, but
I don't think so.
Yeah, well, I'm saying, like, I feel like even his wrestling, like, this is a guy, he didn't grapple at all regionally. You never really saw him do it to his first UFC fight. Comes in, out-grapples Anton Turkalj, but like that was a very close fight. It's not like he went in there and just like dumpstered him from minute one, and Turkalj is like really fucking bad. Second fights Marcin Prachnio. He struggled on the feet all fight and eventually was able to just get on top of him and just kind of maul him there. But I don't know, man. I don't really think his wrestling is that good. I feel like it's a very, very strength and power based. And again, I'm not like, it's not a confident take, but I have this suspicion that when he eventually starts to step up in competition, it's going to be a lot harder for him to get takedowns like that. I just don't think that's his base. I don't think he's that good at it. And to your point, he packs a ton of power in his hands, but his striking, I would argue it's not just his defense. I would say his striking in general just kind of sucks. He's got no defense. He's
pretty
very,
basic.
he's very heavy footed. Like he can't really cut off. He kind of just plants on everything. But I think Modestas is much better on the feet than Patrino is in terms of like sheer skills. He could obviously get caught, but I think he could catch Patrino too. I don't really trust Modestas grappling that much. There's just not enough data on it. And regionally it was pretty shit. So I don't really want to take a position there because it's kind of what's up, Mushroom. It's kind of one of those things where if you're wrong, like the downside on Modestas here is like plus 500, and the upside's like a competitive fight. So I'm kind of happy to pass it, but I don't know. I have a funny feeling about this fight. I sort of suspect it's going to be competitive. I guess we'll see though. Moving on. Curious to hear your take here. We've got Alesiu, Zeleski, Dos Santos taking on Rinat Fakhretdinov, my mortal enemy. Fakhretdinov minus 350 to come back on Zeleski plus 280. What are your thoughts here, Legs?
The Kevin Lee Slayer. I don't think this fight is competitive, to be honest. Unlike the last fight we were just talking about, I think this is Rinat pretty much all day. I think he has a solid grappling advantage. Obviously, the striking is, a bit of a worry in general. I think he's pretty wooden. We talked about this in the past, but I think his wrestling's pretty solid.
I'd have bet Zeleski if I hadn't seen his last fight, to be honest. And I'd have bet him pretty confidently. I don't think
you don't think he's a good wrestler?
It's so weird because like I don't want to like die on this hill and continue to die on this hill with her or not because it's looked very off. I feel like in terms of his wrestling, it's solid. Like it's not bad. But I really don't think it's like he's like this A+ level wrestler that everybody seems to think he is, like I wouldn't say he's like anywhere near the ballpark of like an Islam or an Arman for 170, like nowhere near that. It's good. But I don't think it's elite by any means. What he does have is he seems to be incredibly strong, like physically powerful. And somehow he went from being a complete gasser regionally to having very, very good cardio. In the UFC, which kind of odd, but it's what's happened. And that kind of guy, a guy who's very strong, who's a decent grappler with great cardio, that can work. That's like a cheat code. Obviously, he's got heavy hands, but I don't think his striking is like very good. My issue with this fight is like I think Zeleski's got the tools to keep this fight standing. At least I think he'll get taken down a few times, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't think he's just going to get flattened out on bottom the way like Brian.
That's fair.
I think he's going to work up, make him work a bit. But like watching the Abubakar fight, one, he didn't really seem to like have any urgency disengaging from the clinch, which I think is a problem against Rinat. And second, when he did, historically, Zeleski, when he could get in the space against these guys, he'd let his hands go. He seemed very, very gun shy in that fight. And that kind of scares me because I think if he's going to beat Rinat, he's really got to pull the trigger a lot, like whenever they're in space, because Rinat is there to be cracked. Everybody who spent time in space with him hits him. But I didn't really like that, especially the fact that he's like 37 years old. I don't know. I
don't think his cardio is that great.
Rinat or Zeleski?
Zeleski. No,
Zeleski. It hasn't looked great. I don't know. I can't get there on Zeleski, honestly. I wanted to, but I feel like most of the fight is going to take place up against the fence. And that's just, I just don't think Zeleski does enough in space to kind of give himself the edge he needs in this fight. I actually think the over that goes the distance is interesting here. It's a plus 115 right now. I really don't think he's going to finish Zeleski on the ground. Zeleski's a black belt. He's pretty hard to pass his guard. I'd be a little surprised at a Renat finish in general. I know he just knocked out Kevin Lee, but I mean, Zeleski historically has a great chin. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't hate that shot.
But yeah, we'll move on to more interesting fights. To some heavy juice I'm laying here. Daniel Marcos,
wow.
Victor Hugo Silva, Victor Hugo, whatever the fuck his name is. Marcos currently minus 245. The comeback on Hugo is plus 206. I say whatever the fuck his name is because this guy I don't think is going to be in the UFC for very long, personally.
Yeah.
I think Hugo is just not it. I mean, it's funny because the guy has like a good record and a ton of fights. But man, when you like dig into his record, he really has fought like the absolute dregs. It's embarrassing that he's had 30 fights and has just continued to fight this level of competition. Even his contender series fight, the dude he fought there, Conte, wasn't very good, but was kind of getting the best of him, and he just rolled for a knee bar and ended up getting it. Hugo, to me, he looks slow. He's obviously a grappler. That's his bread and butter, but I don't think he's a great wrestler. Even from top position, I don't think his top game is very good. He likes to roll for heel hooks and knee bars, that kind of stuff, which is always just bad news in the UFC. And honestly, the times he's gotten pushed, I just think this guy's a gasser. I think he's a really bad striker who's a gasser without great wrestling, who is stepping in on short notice to fight Daniel Marcos. Daniel Marcos, not a guy I've been historically a big fan of, honestly. I still am waiting to fade Daniel Marcos, down the road.
You mean other than Simon Oliveira?
I bet Simon Oliveira against him.
I
know. Ironically, which is a great bet. Ironically, he's from the same camp as Simon Oliveira, Victor Hugo.
I know, that's funny.
Yeah, but I look at it and look. I think Marcos has pretty good first level takedown defense. I think his get up game first level is pretty good if you don't pass the dominant position with him. On the feet, he's a decent striker. He can struggle with guys moving around him a bit. But Hugo's not going to like back foot him and move and do it like Davey Grant did, like show him a lot of feints and just volume him up. He's going to walk this dude down, rip leg kicks, and just rip combinations into Hugo's face. Like that is kind of how I'm expecting the stand-up to go. I think Hugo needs to get him down. I think he likely needs to get him out of there very, very early in this fight. I just don't think it's a high like probability. I think the probability of that happening is very, very low, to be honest. Like the last three guys Marcos fought, Grant, Oliveira, and Derrick Lewis, I would all say are better wrestlers than Hugo is. Obviously, Grant, not much of a submission threat, and neither is Lewis. But Oliveira was. But Oliveira never even really got close to getting him down, and he attempted a bunch of takedowns. This is a giant step up in competition for Victor Hugo on very short notice, where he has had a massive deficiency in both cardio and the striking, in my opinion. He needs to get this fight down early, and he needs to either submit him or lay him, pray him. I just don't think either of those things are likely. I'm pretty big on Marcos here at minus 225. I think he's good up to about minus 275. What are your thoughts, Legs?
Yeah, completely agree on the cardio and the striking. And so, yeah, he pretty much does have to get him down early. And I would actually just play a little contrarian and say that I don't think the lay and pray really is live. And I think that he would have to finish him in that first round.
I agree. I agree.
So I think pretty quick and simple there. I think it should be Marcos.
I think Marcos is going to finish him in all likelihood. I don't know what your thoughts on the under are, but it's minus 145. Yeah. I mean, I guess Hugo's not going to bang back with him, but
right.
But we'll move on. I don't think either of us really. I remember Kanan Krzyzewski from Contenders. He fought there this year. Obviously, it was a very quick fight with Dylan Mantello. He's fighting Elvis Brener. Last time I looked, the line was coming in on Krzyzewski. Is it Krzyzewski? He's Brazilian, so like I don't know what we do with this.
Yeah, can't add any help there. No idea.
He's there. Elvis Brener, is currently minus 170. The comeback on Kanan, that's what we're just going to stick with here, Lags. Okay, we agree to that?
Yep.
Kanan?
Yep.
Plus 145. I'm not going to give a big breakdown because, again, I just don't remember the guy's game that well. Line seems like it could be wider to me. I'm kind of surprised, especially given the short notice nature of the fight. Kanan, kind of a generalist, in my opinion. I would say he's more of a striker than anything else. He's got a bunch of subs, but I just don't think he's much of a wrestler or submission grappler from my recollection. Obviously, Brener, a guy who I kind of think is a bit overrated off of beating Guram, who I also think is a bit overrated, but you got to give Brener some credit. He's coming from the shoot box camp and has God knows what in his running through his veins. Decent jiu-jitsu, seems to be very durable, good output on a full camp. I think you have to lead his way, but I'm not going to say too much about it without having looked too closely into it. What are your thoughts here, Legs?
I talked to you about this a little bit before the pod. I haven't really looked into it at all since it was pretty much announced today. So
there we go. So we'll go to a more fun fight here. We start the main card. Oh, before we start the main card, real quick, the reason we are not running the wheel and doing a giveaway this week is because we only had 4 entrants. I said we needed a minimum of 5. Motherfuckers, I am offering you $150 to one person. We are running it back next week. We're going to keep running
Free
it back
money.
to get at least 5. The goal is 10, okay? If we get to 20, I'll bump it to $200. Okay? There we go. Free money, literally, being handed out here, and nobody wants it. 4 people. I appreciate you, but I'm not running that for 4 people. Anyway, we jump into the main card. We got Ishmael Bonfim. He's taking on Vince from Hell, Pichel. Ishmael Bonfim chalked way the hell up there, minus 465. Come back on Pichel, plus 365. What are your thoughts here, Legs?
I mean, I get it. There might be a bit on the wide side, but I mean, I was a guy who backed Pichel in his last fight against Madsen, and he just looks slow and old, man. I think he's past it. I think this is just an absolute setup, which I get it. I get why.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you 100%. I think Bonfim's going to absolutely fucking destroy him. I'm not even like super
I think
high
the
on
under's
Ishmael
not bad.
Bonfim. Minus 130.
It's minus 115, I thought, last time I looked. But
Is
yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is on FanDuel. Or no, DraftKings. And minus 108 on Pinnacle. Yeah, so there's near pick. I don't think that's bad.
Yeah.
I'm 100% with you. I'm a huge Vince fan. One of my favorite guys ever. I bet him fairly large against Madsen. He looked horrendous. He looked slow. He was losing the striking for portions of that fight on the feet. And we're going to talk about Mark Madsen next week. But Mark Madsen is not a very good striker at all. Madsen was dead gassed out at the end of 2 rounds and managed to just grind this guy on the mat for the last 5 minutes of the fight. It was a very bad look for me. I mean, Pichel is very, very old. He trains inconsistently, from my understanding. He obviously fights inconsistently. He's just not active enough, never has been. And look, Ishmael Bonfim, he's got his issues. He's coming off a loss, but obviously the kid's a fucking killer. I actually think it's funny. I keep hearing people referring to him as the bad Bonfim. In my opinion, he is the good Bonfim. I actually think Ishmael is fairly talented. Obviously, he got kind of just overpowered by Benoit Saint-Denis, but that fight's aging pretty well. I mean, Saint-Denis is minus 200 against the top 15 fighter in Matt Favola next week. So I don't think you can give him too much shit for that. Guy's got really good boxing, really, really good body work, seems to have good cardio, decent submission grappler, and he's young. I think Ishmael Bonfim is a decent prospect. And I think the kind of violence and attritional work he brings to the table is going to be just like too much for Vince at this age. Yeah, I mean, Random Malakas just said it in the chat, but like it does feel like on paper the line is wide, but I actually wouldn't be surprised if it's not. Like I'm kind of expecting Ishmael to come out here and just absolutely run roughshod through Vince, which I hate to say. I would love to see Vince win this fight, but too young, too much firepower, not enough firepower from Vince to keep him off him. It should be Bonfim fairly easily. Moving on, though. I know we both have a bet here, so I'll throw it to you first, Legs. We got Rodolfo Vieira. He's taking out Armin Petroia in current line. Petroia minus 112. Comeback Vieira minus 108. What are your thoughts here?
Very interesting fight. Clash of styles. We got striker versus grappler. And I'm going to favor the grappler here, honestly, because there's just been so many instances of Petrosian's takedown defense being poor and being able to held down. I think this is a pretty easy Vieira bet, in my opinion, to pick him. I think he can hang on the feet, whereas like if Petrosian is down there for a little bit, contrary to like Kaio and both Hobocop not subbing him, I think Rodolfo is way much more dangerous on top. So I have a bet on Rodolfo minus 110, win a unit. Nothing passionate.
It's passionate for me.
All right.
I have 4 units on Vieira, average price about pick him. Look, I got cold feet because I listened to fucking idiots a couple weeks ago talk about how Darren Elkins was shot and yada yada yada.
Oh man!
And I cashed out of that bet when my read was 100% right, and he absolutely mugged TJ Brown. I think Rodolfo Vieira is going to mug Armin Petrosian in this fight. I feel as if everybody that likes Petrosian is like the take is he's got bad takedown defense, but he always gets up. And it's like, yes, but I mean, look at the guys he got up against. And if you look at the Caio fight, he was not getting up in that fight.
No, right.
Caio just kept taking his back and holding him down. Even the Bruno fight, Bruno basically instead of just locking down back control, went for a Suloev stretch and fell off him, but he nearly subbed him there. You know, Petrosian always getting up is like really more of a narrative from him fighting regionally and fighting wrestlers who he could just pop up again, who wouldn't take his back. Now, to your point, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, Rodolfo Vieira, he has a much more crushing top game and a much more dangerous top game, both chest to chest and on the back, than either Caio or Bruno does. I mean, Rodolfo Vieira, this is like Gregory. Sorry, this is an ADCC winner here. And Caio, look, Caio's got very, very good positional jiu-jitsu, but he isn't really a finisher. I think he only has 4 from the back, a submission finisher. Yeah. I think he only has 4 subs in his career, believe it or not. He's much more of a consolidate position, ride out rounds type guy. Whereas Rodolfo is absolutely fucking nasty on top. Even his losses, I mean, first of all, Fluffy Fernandez, yes, he went way too hard to start that fight, but Fluffy's a very good grappler, and he put him through the absolute meat grinder for about 7 minutes in that fight before it all went awry and went to hell for him. So, yeah, he's going to take Armin down here. You know, I know he went 0 for 20 against Chris Curtis. Armin Petrosian's got like a 35% takedown defense. I'm pretty confident if he doesn't get melted in the first couple minutes of the fight, he's putting Armin on his back. And I'm pretty confident Armin is not going to be able to just give his back up to get up. It's either going to end up with him being mounted or with Rodolfo on his back, if that happens, both of which are hellacious. If Rodolfo can't finish him early, the question is, what happens? And obviously, I think the thing that many people that are on the Armin side are counting on is Rodolfo's gas tank giving out. I have a hot take that, his cardio is... It's not good by any means, but I feel like the Fluffy fight has just dramatically exaggerated what his cardio looks like, he submitted his second win in the UFC.
Stoltzfus.
Who was it?
Was it
no,
Stoltzfus?
not even that one. I was going to get to that one. What the fuck was it? Why can't I remember this name right now? I'll pull it up. It was Oscar Picotta.
Oh,
black belt. Submitted him late in round 2, looked fine in round 2 in that fight. To your point, Stoltzfus fight. That back take in round 3 was slick as it gets. Then you go to the Curtis fight. Now, I've seen some people say that, if Petrosian hits the body, this guy's going to gas out. Dude, Chris Curtis was absolutely ripping this dude's body hard for 3 rounds. He attempted 20 takedowns in that fight, and he lost the fight, but, round 3 was competitive. He was still coming for Curtis, late in that fight. And so I look at this and I'm like, man, unless all of those other instances are outliers, his cardio is probably fine enough to take down a guy with 35% takedown defense in every round in this fight. Yeah. And Petrosian, I don't think Petrosian is that dangerous of a striker on the feet. I like Petrosian. I bet him in his last fight, but he's not he's not packing huge one-punch power.
No.
So, I mean, to me, the calculus here seems pretty simple. Rodolfo Vieira is fighting a guy with really bad hips, who gives up his back, who doesn't really have jiu-jitsu,
who doesn't have a ton of power.
Who doesn't have a ton of power, yeah. And I feel like people look at the Brundage fight and say, well, Brundage cracks, man. He's hard to take down, and he cracks. And he also still submitted him late in round 2. So... I don't know. I think this matchup is very, very, very friendly to Vieira here. I actually think this should be closer to minus 200. I'm going to look like an absolute mook if he loses this fight, but I really think he's going to go out there and run through Armin. We'll see what happens, but I feel like I trust my read on the grappling here. If he gets him down, I think it's going to be, I don't think Armin gets up personally.
Yeah. Yep. It's all about the context,
That's the thing. It is all about the context. So we move on. Speaking of Caio Bahayo, he is taking on Abus Magomedov. Current line, Kaio minus 300, Magomedov plus 250. I don't know. I've heard like compelling cases for Abus that are like market based, which I usually like, as you know, where it's like, Abus was like plus 140 against Sean Strickland. Now he's plus 250 here. I feel like that was the market just getting Abus very, very wrong, and in part because of his name. I like what look at the rest of his career. It's not like he lost to Sean Strickland, but has like a length history of beating good fighters. In fact, it's the opposite. Like he lost to Sean Strickland. He has a lengthy history of KOing bums. And other than that, having pretty sweaty fights with some pretty mid fighters. Like I love PFL. I'm a big fan of Sada Busi. He went life and death with Sada Busi. And Sada Busi is not hanging with this level in the UFC. And so I don't think Abus is very good. I think he's dangerous. He packs some heat early in fights, but I don't really think he's plus at very much. Obviously, he's taking on Kaio here. Kaio's striking seems pretty average to me. Karate style, pretty easy to hit if you can close distance on him. Bread and butter is obviously the grappling, and he's very, very good at picking his engagements and when to get them. And if he gets to your back, you don't get up. Fights in Brazil obviously favors Kaio. I don't know. I look at it. I feel I wouldn't be surprised if Abus had some success early, was able to stuff the takedowns, have some success standing, maybe put it on him a bit. I don't see much reason to think that Abus has much better cardio than last time out, though. I've seen him gas in extended fights prior to this. I think if Kaio does get him down, he probably dominates him. Potentially could finish if he does, though, as I mentioned, I don't really trust his pure submission game that much. But yeah, I mean, I'm not that interested in it. Abus to me just seems like a fraud with the name Magomedov, who they brought in and didn't realize was a German fighter and not a guy who's training in Dagestan. What are your thoughts, Legs?
Yep, agreed on the Abus being a fraud. I mean, 100%. We catched him Sean Strickland big in his last fight. In terms of this fight, though, the only thing to me that would be playable would be the under, and the only thing that gives me pause there is just, I mean, kind of what we talked about in the last fight is that Kaio just kind of has. He's very patient on the feet, that karate style, very risk adverse. But when he goes to the grappling, I mean, obviously he can be dominant. That's kind of like just you're playing with fire a little bit in that sense. That as soon as he goes to the grappling, I feel like in this spot, when the cardio drains a bit, he's going to finish him. So sub 2, sub 3, I think that's probably maybe a better way than playing the juiced under. But
yeah,
we'll see.
I mean, I get the Abu side, and I understand it. It's a case I like to make a lot. I just. Right. The guy has a lengthy history of really not doing much impressive, in my opinion. Like the most impressive thing he did in his career was take a round off Sean Strickland before his tank went to literally 0 in round 2 when he got finished. So we'll see. Moving on, another interesting fight here. Well, it's a fight we didn't really need.
Yeah.
Rodrigo Nascimento, he's taking on Jailton Almeida. It's a rematch. Current price, Nascimento minus 171. Comeback Maze plus 146. What are your thoughts, Legs?
Well, for starters, and I got to get your opinion on this because I feel like it's every single week or maybe every other week that we have this. The third to last fight on the card is always a sloppy heavyweight fight.
Oh, yeah.
Almost always. And it's that spot right there. It's not the co-main. It's not the main. It's the third to last.
Or it's the main. We like our heavyweight mains.
That's true. We do, but that's a little not as sloppy, not as low level as this. But yeah, I don't think much should change from the first fight. I know that's a take that you're hearing, from everybody this week, but I don't see why it should change. I think Nascimento, pretty big grappling edge. He's pretty hittable on the feet, yeah, but I think Maze is one of the worst. Man, he's not that great defensively at all. He needs a KO, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, fuck Jailton Maze. He'll never get my money again until the next time he gets my money. But I would bet Nascimento at minus 150 here, I think. I agree with you. I don't see – I mean, we saw Nascimento just flat out dog him from top position when he got there in the first fight. I think that probably happens again if he gets there. I even think, to your point, yeah, I mean, Nascimento's hittable, and I can imagine Maze knocking him out. It's not that hard to imagine. But I actually don't think the striking is much of a gap, though. I feel like the striking should be pretty competitive between these two. And, I mean, we know Nascimento is going to attempt takedowns. We know Jailton Almeida's defensive wrestling is pretty fucking poor. rip all the money I lost against Hamdi last year, like trusting him to beat a very mid MMA grappler. I think Maye should get him down pretty easy. I think he should get the top position pretty easy. On top of that, it's like Dontali Mays is older. He's training out of Jackson Wink. Like, no one's coming out of Jackson and fighting well anymore. Nascimento, he's at ATT. He's 30 years old. Like, it's a guy who, you know, we should expect to still be making improvements at this point in his career. So, yeah, I feel like there's more upside on Nascimento getting better. I think he's probably got more finishing upside here. I think he has more minute upside. Should be able to get takedowns whenever he wants. Man, he's beaten the guy before. I just can't really get there or understand really Maye's bets, to be honest. I think Nascimento minus 200-ish is probably fine. I'm not like eager to lay juice on a heavyweight, but minus 150, I'll dip my toes in the water. Moving on, though, Gabriel Bonfim, the guy who the people know is the good Bonfim. He's taking on Nicholas Dolby. Gabriel Bonfim, minus 600. Comeback on Dolby is plus 450. I don't think Gabriel Bonfim is the good Bonfim, to be quite honest. I think quite the opposite, to be honest with you. Like, Gabe Bonfim does some good stuff. He's obviously a very good athlete, very fast hands, and a really, really nasty squeeze on his guillotine. No doubt about that. But he is hittable if you get inside on him. The one time I've seen this guy really get extended deep into a fight, his gas tank looked pretty suspect to me against Brener Alberth. And Brener Alberth, not a very good fighter, but he was touching him up later in the fight before he got finished. Bonfim, he's had 2 performances in the UFC. The first one, Munir Lazez dove into a guillotine 40 seconds in. The second one, Trevin Giles stuck his neck into pretty early in that fight as well, a minute and a half in. So, I mean, could he guillotine Dolby here? Like, sure, but I mean, nobody submitted Dolby, and I'm sure someone's going to reference the fact that he got submitted by Jesse Ronson. But he was also like club and sub in that fight too. First of all, you know, he was basically KO'd first and then submitted.
Shout out to the podcast.
Yeah, to our podcast.
Yep.
Like and subscribe. But I feel like Dolby, I mean, we've seen him mess around on the mat with some pretty good jiu-jitsu players. I think Dolby's like pretty capable of staying safe. I would not, like, if Bonfim's jumping guillotines here, I do not think it's going to go well for him. Like, that style of fighting, you know, jumping guillotines, pulling guard, it just doesn't work in modern MMA, because when the guillotine eventually doesn't hit, you end up on your back and then with no ability to get up. And I feel like that's a pretty plausible outcome. Even on the feet, like, Dolby's done a pretty good job throughout his career of like kind of mitigating exchanges and making guys who historically put up big striking numbers, put up much worse numbers. You look at the fight with Daniel Rodriguez, held Daniel Rodriguez to 80 significant strikes over 15 minutes. Tim Means, I think he held to like 55 significant strikes. Both of those guys, very, very high volume strikers. Dolby just has a way of making fights dirty. And I look at this and I trust Dolby's cardio a lot more than a guy like Trevin Giles. I trust his fight IQ more. I trust his toughness more. I feel like unless Bonfim continues to just high roll first 2-minute finishes, one of these days he's going to get tested. And I am not sure that I'm at the point with this guy where I feel like you can be comfortable with him going past a round. He fights very explosive and very explosive bursts early in fights. He's shown a capacity for slowing down before, and guillotining people just isn't a consistent outcome in the UFC. So, yeah, he could just age bully Dolby here, but we've seen Dolby look pretty good in recent years. I don't know. I feel like unless he finishes him quick, as he did with Giles and Lazez, it's probably going to be a pretty competitive fight. So, yeah, I lean the Dolby side. I trust his experience. I trust his submission defense. And I think he's going to be a tough guy to finish here. I think he's going to bring Bonfim to places he hasn't been before. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm picking Bonfim to win, but I think plus 450 seems mad to me. What are your thoughts, Lags?
Yeah, I mean, regarding the submission scores, I think it's more of just a club and sub situation anyways. I don't think there's a process sub obviously coming here by any means. But I do think he does probably find an early finish. Obviously not as quick as those two, but just mainly because I think Dolby fights in that like a weaselly kind of style. He just, like you said, kind of risk adverse. But I don't know. I just think Bonf and both of them in general, very explosive athletes, and very good finishers.
But I mean, but why? So like, but why? I mean, what makes you think he'll get an early finish, though? I guess is my question.
I don't rate Dolby striking like that great. It's just weird. So I mean, I think the power, aggressiveness, Bonf. I don't know. That's what I don't. I'm not out here laying like the under 1.5 minus 145, but that's where I'd be leaning here.
I mean, that's what I would bet if I liked Bonfim, honestly.
Yeah.
Is the under minus 145. I mean, I really, I mean, he could obviously win a decision, but
right.
I think if he goes the distance with Dolby, it's likely very competitive. You're not going to be very happy about your huge juice ticket if that's the case, you know?
Yep. That's fair.
Moving on, bit of a bummer of a fight. We got Jailton Almeida. He's taking on Derrick Lewis. Current price, Almeida minus 500. Come back on Lewis plus 385. What are your thoughts here, Lags?
Well, this was Jailton Almeida, Curtis Blades, and that was a banger main event, and probably, again, would have answered more questions than this would. I don't think this sees more than 5 minutes. I think Almeida finishes Lewis. Lewis bad hips, pretty old. I mean, we talked about it a little bit before the pod. I don't think that the Lima finish really changes my opinion of Lewis's washedness. So, yeah.
Yeah, the under 4.5 is minus 2,500 at the moment.
Oh,
believe it or not.
value.
Yeah. It's very unfortunate because I felt like Curtis Blades as an underdog was one of the greatest money-making opportunities of the year. I really, really believe that. Yeah, I guess my view is prior to last fight with Lewis, I bet the Lima pretty big against him because I had pretty high conviction Lewis was shot. And then Lewis went and knocked him out in 5 seconds, more or less. But that's not really enough to tell me Lewis is not shot. You know, I didn't see anything to really change my priors on how I was feeling about Lewis. You know, the bottom line is the last couple times we've seen him be forced to fight hard, he's basically 2 to 3 minutes and then he's waving the white flag and wants the fuck out of there. And so as much as I want to bet Lewis in a spot like this at a price like this, it's just very, very hard for me to get there because I just think the guy is done. On the other side of things, like Jailton, I do not think Jailton's a good wrestler. Like you go back and watch the Rosenstruck fight, the first takedowns he shoots is abysmal. The second one he shoots that gets Rosenstruck down, it's like, how? He didn't even like get to your knees. He basically like caught his ankle and Rosenstruck just fell over. It's like this, he is cheating undexterous heavyweights. That's what's happening right now and how he's getting these takedowns. I feel like we're a couple fights, maybe even one fight away from him fighting somebody that just knows how to sprawl and just easily keeping this on its feet and just beating the absolute shit out of Jailton because he can't strike at all. But he's going to try to take Lewis down right away. I could imagine a world in where Lewis can just sprawl on the double leg a couple times and potentially knock him out. But to your point, Lewis's hips have looked dust in recent years. He looks just old and like a broken down body. And that is not the kind of guy I really want to back with Jailton. But with all of that said, if I got Lewis plus 500, he's plus 385 right now. I would take a poke at plus 500, I think, just because he does have one hitter quitter power. And as I mentioned, I kind of think Jailton is, I mean, he's got great jiu-jitsu. Don't get me wrong. But I think the rest of his game outside of his pure jiu-jitsu is pretty terrible. And so, like, if Lewis stuffs 2 to 3 takedowns, you might be looking at this and be like, oh my God, Jailton's terrified. He's backing up towards the fence, and now he's got gigantic Derrick Lewis just flurrying gross bombs at him. But I don't expect that to happen. I think he's going to take him down, put him on his back, likely submit him pretty early here. But the price is crazy. I mean, Jailton Almeida, Derrick Lewis is a mountain of a man. He is a giant human being. And Jailton Almeida is a guy who's been weighing in for these fights at 220. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if something crazy happened. I just don't think Lewis is it. Let's get a finish here and then get me like a nice like Marcin Tybura, like plus 450, plus 500, something like that, you know? Someone who I know can hold up in the early portion of the fight. That's what I'm looking for, frankly. Or just rebook the Blades fight. That would be great too. I had a max bet on Blades, and
they'll probably rebook it if he wins pretty quick.
I hope so. I would like them to book it in America in the small cage. That Curtis just pound his face through the fence. But yeah, I'm probably not going to bet the fight. I feel like the most interesting angle And even this, to like what I just said, Lewis quits so fast these days. But the most interesting angle is like over 1.5 plus 250, just because. I mean, Lewis might give him a round of the just get up thing where he just stands up or makes out and work a bit. I could see that happening. But I feel like that's gambling, and I have enough action on the card that I don't really need to get involved there. You know,
what I will say is though, I feel like he probably does KO him versus sub. Like I would much rather, not that the price is good or anything, but I think he KOs him.
You think Jailton KOs him?
Yeah, ground and pound more or less than a sub. Yeah.
He could. Well, we'll see what happens. It's on Saturday. That's going to do it tonight, guys. If you like the show, drop a like, subscribe. We'll be back next Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, with a very special guest. We got Mike's MMA Picks making his second appearance on the Club and Sub podcast. He's going to come out here, talk UFC 295 with us. It's going to be fun. Is it 295? It is 295, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So stop by next week, drop a like, subscribe. Again, we're going to run the contest next week. We did not get to 5 this time, and hopefully we will next time. But guys, hope you have a good night. Hope you do well on your bets this weekend, unless they're against us. Peace out.